This is John Howell Essential Cuts, your daily rundown of the best from today's show on 890 WLS.
Well, obviously, Donald Trump, we know what he thinks about all the legal maneuvers against him.
From the beginning, it's been one witch hunt and phony investigation after another.
But in a late-night filing, Trump's defense team said he can't possibly receive a fair trial before the election. They have some legitimate complaints. Obviously, this filing on behalf of Trump sets up a significant legal test in more than one category. Let's start there with my friend Kyle Cheney, who is the senior legal affairs reporter for Politico.com. And if you need to keep up on all these cases, you can do no better than reading Kyle Cheney. So which issues in the mind of the defense are front and center here, Kyle?
So to me, the most important thing that Trump's filing creates is a moment for the judge in this case. It's Judge Aileen Cannon, who is a Trump appointee herself. She's already developed something of a reputation, fairly or not, for sort of being in Trump's corner the way she was when he filed a civil lawsuit related to the search of his Mar-a-Lago estate. So now she's in a position where she can decide, does this trial happen before the election or not? It's entirely up to her. She knows DOJ wants the trial fast in December. That's probably unrealistically fast, but at least a year faster than what Donald Trump wants. And so now it's in her court.
I want to get back to how complicated the case is or isn't. There's discrepancies regarding that. But this is Trump's typical legal strategy over decades to basically just kind of drag it out.
It is, and now Trump's not been charged with a crime until recently in New York City and now federally in this documents case. But he is seeming to adopt the same sort of strategy, which is make things take as long as they can. It causes all kinds of turmoil in the legal positioning of different parties. It can create new elements that can complicate things. And this is an example. The closer you get to the election in this case, the more difficult it is politically to sustain a prosecution. And, of course, if he wins the election, it completely changes the calculus for this. So certainly in his mind.
Certainly historically unprecedented, isn't it?
Every piece of this, every time there's a new filing, it's something that's really never been done before in the context of a former president. And so while some of the legal issues might be well-trod, in the context of it being a former president facing trial, everything is new.
I think it is a legitimate concern of his defense team that they have a civil trial set for October in New York. That's dealing businesses, his business alleged fraud. And then they got a criminal trial set in the Stormy Daniels trial. That's coming up as well. Why does Jack Smith want to move so quickly on this? Is this just how the feds normally work?
It's not, actually. Certainly not. In cases like this, with this kind of classified information, no, these things typically move extremely slowly, but you don't have the added layer of a presidential election to think about. I think what DOJ is trying to position it as is in the public interest. They keep using that phrase, in the public interest. And I think what that's code for is we don't want to have a trial in the middle of a political season when everything's going to get put in that lens, and it could damage the credibility of the process. And, it's going to be difficult anyway as it is, but at least if they can do it by December in Jack Smith's scheduling proposal, that would happen before any votes are cast in the Republican primaries. Again, seems unrealistically fast, but that seems to be what's in their mind as to why you push the envelope a little bit on timing.
Two more little subsets to this. We're with Kyle Cheney, senior legal affairs reporter for Politico.com. I hear it's a very complicated case. Obviously, there's classified documents. And I hear also that some people think it's relatively straightforward. Number one, did he have the documents? Number two, did he obstruct justice in not returning them? That being said, you already said that these cases normally drag out for quite a while. Is it or is it not a simple case?
Well, that's part of what's at issue here. DOJ says, from a legal perspective, it is actually quite simple. The reason these classified cases take longer is because when you're dealing with classified evidence, it's a lot more difficult to put that stuff in front of a jury and in public because trials have to be public. Constitutionally, they're required to be public. but you can't just reveal the nation's secrets in a case where classified documents were at issue. That's the whole point of trying to protect classified information. So that's why it takes longer. They have to come up with a set of procedures and decide what can be made public, what can't be, and the judge has a lot of discretion there too. So it's complicated in a logistical sense, but in a legal sense, DOJ says, look, the issues are clear. The obstruction piece in particular is going to be pretty straightforward, whereas Trump says, no, this is the most complicated case that's ever happened in American history, and I'm going to fight every single piece of this to make it even more complicated. So that's where one of the battles we're seeing.
Okay, and then finally, Kyle Cheney, all right, he wins the election. All right, that brings up two or three things in my mind. Number one, can we put a sitting president on trial? We should have sorted that out years ago during the Nixon era. Number two, can he self-pardon? And number three, can he pull the plug on any lingering criminal matters? Just tell his own DOJ, shut it down.
Yeah, I think number three is the most obvious place he would go first because he has complete control over who runs his Justice Department and who would handle a situation like that. And so, I think all of the above, and that because it's such an uncharted situation, who knows? Can a president self-pardon? It's disputed. There's some doubt about that. But would he try it? Almost certainly. Would the Justice Department be able to sustain the prosecution of a president-elect or a sitting president? No, probably not. So it seems like if he wins the election and the trial hasn't happened, there's a good possibility that it won't ever happen. But again, that's the sort of nightmare scenario DOJ, I think, is hoping to avoid.
Kyle Cheney, thank you for your time. We'll read more at Politico.com. You're covering this as well as anybody in the nation. I appreciate your time.
Thank you so much. Good to be here.
There was no document. That was a massive amount of papers and everything else talking about Iran and other things. And it may have been held up or may not, but that was not a document. I didn't have a document per se. There was nothing to declassify. These were newspaper stories, magazine stories, and articles.
I'm just saying what the indictment said.
Just saying what the indictment said. Good luck. Good luck with that defense. They're golf shirts. But you only need one. You only need one.
You're listening to John Howell, Essential Cuts on 890 WLS.
In baseball, there are superstars and stars and everyday players, and then there's everybody else. And within the rest are role players and specialists and journeymen, and then they are the backup catchers. This book is about backup catchers. The Tao of the backup catcher playing baseball for the love of the game. The author is Tim Brown. He's an award-winning writer for 25-plus years. You read him in a variety of places. He's already written several great books. One is about that former Major League pitcher Jim Abbott, which was a great book as well. I recommend this. I've not read the entire book, but I think it's a really well-done book for all baseball fans. So, Tim, welcome to WLS, sir. Why did you not dedicate this book to Crash Davis?
It's funny you mention that. I set out to write this book, and I said, I am not going to bring up Crash Davis. It's too easy. I'm not going to fall into the trap. And then right in the middle of it, Joe Madden gave me this great quote with Crash Davis right in the middle of that. So I was like, well, okay, I'm going to say one time, allow someone else to say Crash Davis.
Well, I love that movie. I'm going to get back to that in a minute because a lot of those quotes, I think, really bring up some of the spirit and the essence of your book, too. I'm really interested in Josh Paul. I know that he's not the focus. The main profile is of Eric Kratz, but Josh Paul, a guy from Buffalo Grove, Illinois, who played first for the White Sox and then on the north side for the Cubs. I mean, he kind of encapsulates what you're trying to get at with this book, too. A guy that just, nose to the grindstone, learn the game, coach the game on the field, and hang on as long as you can in the majors.
I love Josh Paul, and Josh Paul is in the book. We spent a good amount of time at it was during spring training, and he was driving back and forth from the spring site to his house. I think he lived in like Wesley Chapel down there or something. And he does have a place in Chicago lore. In the 2005 ALCS, he was the catcher when A.J. Pierzynski ran to first on the dropped or not dropped third strike that turned that game around. We talked a lot about Josh Paul and AJ and the 2005 World Series team. Yeah, and Josh went to Vandy before Vandy was Vandy, and sort of helped create that program down there, if you want to call it that, and is a smart guy, and I'm still waiting on him to become a manager. I think he has what it takes for that.
Josh Paul's involved with the Tigers now, isn't he?
He is, yes.
And I had forgotten about that series where he was behind the plate for the Angels. That's when A.J. Brzezinski decided, I'll stretch out, I'll run to first base, and that was a heads-up play by A.J., but I'd forgotten that Josh Paul was behind the plate for the Angels. So he's doing well, playing for the Tigers. Well, not playing for the Tigers, coaching for the Tigers. And as you just mentioned, maybe a future manager on the major league level. Are you familiar with a great book? It's a legendary book, Hall of Fame book, Boys of Summer by Roger Kahn.
Oh, boy, yeah. It's like my Bible.
I think this book is a fair comparison as kind of a modern, updated Boys of Summer. We're talking about the Tao of the backup catcher playing baseball for the love of the game with the author here. It's out now, Tim Brown. Tell me about Eric Kratz. Tell me a little bit about his career. He's a big part of the book. Yeah,
so Eric was born and raised in a little town outside of Philadelphia called Telford, and played sort of low, didn't make his varsity team until his junior year of high school, and only made the team because the catcher ahead of him was caught smoking a cigarette on campus, so he was thrown off the team. So Eric made the varsity team as a junior, went to Division III Eastern Mennonite University, where he caught, get this, John, for 4 years, not a single other catcher caught a pitch at Eastern Mennonite University. He caught every pitch thrown for 4 years, and then gave back the mitt that he had borrowed when he walked in the door because the next catcher coming in was going to need a mitt. Drafted 866th overall, and then played 19 professional seasons for 14 different organizations. He was the subject of about 120 transactions in the course of his career. Managed to get about 900 at-bats in the big leagues and retired at 40 years old as one of the greatest hitting Yankees ever, John. He hit in 32 plate appearances, he hit 360-something. So I always figured, like, after 32, that's where it gets tough. But he's just a good soul. Like you said, I built the book around Eric because of his story, the story of his wife, Sarah, who basically they got married early. They had 3 kids early. She drove all over the country. Family was really important to him. And so she's partially the hero of this book. She really helped. I'm not sure there'd be a book like this without Eric Kratz, and I'm sure there would not be an Eric Kratz without Sarah.
This is a great book. I love this passage from page 277. The most we can do is show up, play on, believe in something, celebrate the good stuff, laugh at the dumb stuff, have a good cry, block a ball in the dirt for a friend once in a while, and then be the sort of person others can rely on. Baseball isn't life, but it's not a bad place to practice life. It's why they invented the backup catcher. This is a great book. I have a shelf full of great baseball books. The other one that I have of yours that I really like is the book on Jim Abbott. What is he up to nowadays?
Jim Abbott is living in Newport Beach, California, and he had 2 daughters who also went to Michigan. One played water polo, the other played volleyball, and they both graduated from Michigan, so they just can't get off of the Michigan thing. And he's corporate speaking, and he and I, before I moved to Raleigh, North Carolina a few months back, played golf pretty regularly.
How does he shoot?
He beat me way too often.
Wow.
Let's say that.
What an inspiration that guy was, Jim Abbott. And for those who don't know Jim Abbott, born without essentially one arm, correct?
Born without a right hand.
That's it.
Yeah.
But still pitched
for 10 years in the big leagues.
And fielded really well too. Think about that.
Yep, he's quite an athlete.
The Tao of the Backup Catcher, Playing Baseball for the Love of the Game by Tim Brown. It's out now. It is a terrific book. What's your favorite Kevin Costner baseball movie?
Oh gosh, I mean it would have to be Bull Durham. I can't watch the dang thing without crying, so it must be my favorite.
Well, Field of Dreams is up there as a tear fest.
Yeah, that's a good one too. I just sort of like I love the story. I just can't sort of get past. I've never been a science fiction guy, and I can't get past that part of it as easily as I can Bull Durham. But I do like Field of Dreams as well.
And Love of the Game. I grew up a Tiger fan. I'm a fan of Love of the Game too. Even though it's a dopey little love story, I like the baseball scenes.
I'm a sap like you are. Give me something dopey, and I'll tear up with drop of a hat.
Tim, congratulations on another great book. When you see Josh Paul, tell him his friends in Chicago remember him and like him to stop by once in a while.
I will. He's one of my favorites. And you know what? You give me an excuse to give him a shout and check in. So thank you for that.
Relax. All right? Don't try to strike everybody out. Strikeouts are boring. Besides that, they're fascist. Throw some ground balls. It's more democratic.
This is John Howell Essential Cuts on 890 WLS.
What was it, July of 1995, here in Chicago, we had 725, at least, seems like 725 deaths in just 5 days. So we have experienced heat waves here.
It is a crisis. It's hot. It's hot out there. We all walk out there. It's very, very, very hot.
But that was then. This is now. Temperatures have climbed to extreme levels, even for the hottest parts of the USA. Phoenix, their heat wave is the longest ever historically, today. In Texas, a blackout, they're estimating, would kill 9 times more people than Katrina. And that Texas power grid, you know how, it's a bit tenuous. The Florida ocean warmth has soared to shocking levels. Canada has seen the farthest north 100-degree day ever. And on the other end of the spectrum, because of rain, the capital of Vermont is cut off and bracing for a catastrophic flood and the failure of the dam, which could happen at any moment. Things are happening. Let's go out to Los Angeles and start there with Alex Stone. He's working for ABC News and joins us from time to time. Well, let's talk about the heat wave in particular that stretches from Arizona to Florida. How bad is it? How much worse is it going to get?
Yeah, so smoking hot, Arizona to Florida, and it's moving west. It's actually in retrograde, so that high pressure that is creating the heat is actually going to move backwards from over New Mexico and Arizona and then into California for the way that it's being pushed back. So that's going to create a lot more heat. But places like Phoenix, New Orleans, Miami, you mentioned the water temperature, 95 degrees today when you get in the ocean. I mean, that's incredible. Tub. Yeah, it's getting in a hot tub. And, just incredible. Outside with the humidity, it feels like 110 degrees in Miami. Then you got the dry heat of Arizona where by Friday, Phoenix could be doing 115 to 120. Granted, people do live in Phoenix. It is July, so you would expect it to be hot. But firefighters there who are doing the regular shifts, not wildfires, they've had a couple of structure fire calls in the last couple of days, plus regular medical calls and everything. They say it's kind of nuts.
And it would be like putting on your best snowsuit and then going out in 110 degrees and start doing some physical labor.
Because of all the turnout gear that they have to wear and the oxygen bottles and everything else. So they say they're telling the men and women at Glendale, Arizona Fire, drink tons of water on their day off before they come in. They want them pre-hydrated.
The day before, we're pre-hydrating. Because if we're hydrating today, we're already behind the curveball.
Yeah, so they're out there. Landscapers are out as well. They're doing their work. They've got the lawnmowers. They've got the weed whackers out. And for landscapers, they're being told stay away from energy drinks, stay away from caffeine, drink lots of water, nonstop water in the 115 degrees. This guy owns a landscaping company.
I had a customer actually fall out on me when I was giving an estimate, and I had to call 911 and keep her cool until the paramedics got there.
So it's warm, and then John, back to the firefighters. That heat dome moving west. Already we've had the last couple of days few wildfires. Actually, one that started a little while ago in Southern California, but they've been able to get on.
Here we go, wildfires.
On most of them because the wind isn't here. But when we get the wind, and especially going into the fall, there's never a good – it's always bad. Either we haven't had enough rain and it's so dry that everything's going to be explosive, or we've had too much rain like this year where everything grew and is now drying out and going to be explosive.
So everything's kindling now.
Yeah.
Looked beautiful for a couple weeks.
It did. When it was green, it looked like Ireland, and now it's all brown.
Thank you, sir. We'll check back in with you. Appreciate it.
You got it. Sounds good. Thanks, John.
Alex Stone out in Los Angeles reporting for ABC News here on the Big 89.
You're listening to John Howell, Essential Cuts on 890 WLS.
All right, let's talk a little bit more about the developments at Northwestern. Again, we're starting to get some great responses. This is basically an essay question, people. If you were the Northwestern University president, how would you have handled the situation with Coach Fitzgerald? And this is not over because you have some allegations of inappropriate behavior now on the baseball team as well. So it's not going away anytime soon. I just want to take a few minutes. My friend Rick Tellender wrote on this today in the Sun-Times. My friend Rick Morrissey wrote on this yesterday in the Sun-Times. This is Tellender. And I'll just give you the germane portions of his column. The Northwestern campus is gorgeous on this fine summer day. And remember, Rick Tellender was an All-American football player at Northwestern, drafted by the Kansas City Chiefs. The Northwestern campus is gorgeous on this fine summer day. You can almost understand why it costs $75K a year to go there and why the acceptance rate is a rarefied 7%. In short, Northwestern is the Big Ten's Ivy League school. Then there's a football program. Pat Fitzgerald, the head coach, the last 17 years, was fired at dinner time yesterday. Ivy League? No, Bush League. The hazing perversity that went on in the football brotherhood, and please forget the pathetically arrogant and illogical denial letter from, quote-unquote, the entire team, finally did in a coach who likely is more suited to be an armed forces recruiter than a builder of college men. Ooh, that one stings. You know, this is from Rick Tellender. The darkened room car wash punishment for the unlucky underclassmen by older, mask-wearing teammates was supposed to build camaraderie and be a laugh riot. Well, that's hazing 101, people, and it's about as funny and bonding as beating a friend with a stick because he's your pal. And there was more, even uglier stuff. He goes on for the rest of that paragraph to describe some of the other things brought up in the investigation, the report. That Northwestern tried to slip in the news of Fitzgerald's initial 2-week suspension without pay on a Friday afternoon is classic information suppression. News often vanishes over weekends. It's dead and buried by Monday. Not this time. On Saturday, reporters at the Daily Northwestern, the student newspaper, laid out the hazing details. And Northwestern hoped that this would evaporate like Fitzgerald's meaningless suspension were dashed. After all, there's nothing football-related going on these 2 weeks in July, and losing a couple of $100,000 from an annual paycheck of over $5 million won't sting much. Fitzgerald was in an early part of a 10-year, $50 million plus contract. The president of Northwestern said the hazing we investigated was widespread and clearly not a secret within the program. Coaches know, they are paid to know, and they do know. Again, I'm reading from a Rick Tellender column in today's Sun-Times. Fitzgerald had to have known what was going on. Not only that, but he encouraged it. For example, all summer practices at Camp Kenosha in Wisconsin, there was a ritual of putting watermelon slices, rind and all, on towels on the field and making freshman players lie on their stomachs, hands behind their backs, and eat the fruit as fast as they could, while upperclassmen cheered and screamed, coaches too. Photos of black players doing this are so inherently racist as to be obscene. Again, these are Rick Tellender's words. And there's a lot more. I'm just cherry-picking from this. Hazing once might have been winked at, but so was sexual insult, harassment, and assault. Then came #MeToo. Did Fitzgerald learn nothing from the Northwestern women's soccer team being suspended for hazing in 2006? What about Wheaton College's hazing disaster in 2014? 5 football players were charged with crimes. How about the Blackhawks' recent sexual assault scandal? If this is what they do in the military, and Fitz loved the jarhead look, like Army illusions, and the SEAL training, and the camouflage, etc., then join a military branch and go for it. I guess the bottom line is that this scandal was bound to happen. The fuse was lit a long time ago. And there's more, as I mentioned, but now you can respond to that if you'd like. If you were the Northwestern president, What would you have done? And what's next? And was this overreaction or was this overdue?
John Howell, Essential Cuts. Check back every weekday for another episode of John Howell, Essential Cuts on 890 WLS.